Hello everyone, welcome back to the Tabletop Almanac. My name is Simon, and I am here with another review for you this episode. And this episode we are looking at VAESEN by Free League Publishing. Now this continues the score of outstanding Free League Publishing products that I absolutely love and adore. So you will hear some good things from me about this game. Let's talk about what VAESEN is first. VAESEN is a Nordic horror game set in the mythic north. It's Northern Europe of the 19th century, but it is a mythic version. So you can expect the supernatural to be present. You can expect it to not 100% match up to our world's history, which is great because many enough places at that time were total shitholes for people who weren't white dudes, and this is a nice way of avoiding having to have anybody on the table go, well, actually. It's also a good way if you like historical kind of role-playing and historical settings, but you don't want to be beholden to the well, actually, person at the table who has a degree in this area. You can say, well, not in this mythic north. Now, before anyone comes at me about that, I can't imagine people are going to say that for most things, except A, things that they absolutely don't know, in which case probably the best jamming method is to step back and say, I didn't know that, let's address that next session. Or, well, that's horrible and will completely alienate people X, Y, and Z in this group, and I don't want to have it. So, little screed aside there. Okay. So, what is VAESEN Part 2? It is an investigative horror role-playing game where the PCs play Thursday's children. These are people who latently have the sight, so the ability to see, sense, whatever, the supernatural. And they go through some sort of trauma at some point. And when that happens, they can now fully sense it, right? The sight is open to them. They are now seeing. And they are contacted by an old woman who used to belong, I guess still sort of belongs to the Society, capital T, capital S. And the Society was a group that investigated VAESEN, which is the catch-all name for supernatural creatures throughout the mythic north, and would stop them from harming humanity. Now, easier said than done. Over time, they all, died, retired, found themselves unable to continue. And she gives you, the PC group, a castle, which is pretty cool. And then sort of puts that task upon you to now build the new society. So you go out and you investigate and you find ways to defeat the VAESEN, which mostly won't involve hitting them with stuff because that's the quickest way to die. All right, so that alone means you've got a lot of opportunity to dig into folklore for your stories, or your mysteries, as they're put, and understand a lot of the plot lines. Create a lot of plot lines. And now one thing to note is that the art is done by Johan Egerkrans, or at least a large portion of it is, who did a book on Nordic folklore, which inspired this game, etc., etc. Just thought that'd be worth mentioning. The book itself is gorgeous, has a nice cloth cover, by which I mean it's the sort of slightly rough, not glossy cover. The pages are not glossy either. This is the second one I've had like this. The first was the One Ring, which sort of surprised me because a lot of them are glossy these days, but maybe I was just used to that. Okay, so the unseen, that's what they call the supernatural. This basically is set in Uppsala in Sweden, but of course you can place it anywhere, and there is an expansion in Mythic Britain and Ireland, which moves the action over to Mythic Britain and Ireland. It uses the Year Zero dice pool system, and I'm distinguishing it because of Twilight 2000 and Blade Runner, which use a dice step version of the Year Zero engine. So what happens is that you will roll your attribute plus your skill in d6s, try to get a 6, at least one. 1 is enough to succeed because you modify your dice pool based on adding or subtracting dice. And then any extra 6s can be used as bonus points and stuff. When you're creating your character, you pick an archetype. You don't necessarily have to. There is a random character generator background and everything in the back of the book, in the appendix. But if you're just starting out, and as my group was, I would suggest using the archetypes. There are enough of them, and they are good and entertaining, and are definitely worth your time. When you are doing this, you pick motivations for your characters and dark secrets. And this was something that a couple of friends of mine looked at and found interesting. They don't necessarily have much in the way of a mechanical effect. Plenty of storyline effect and roleplay effect, but you don't get to be able to push dice or anything like that. Oh yeah, let's go back. Pushing dice is whenever you make a check, and you want to get more successes than you got. You re-roll all the non-6s. But there is a cost to it. Not quite the same as in some of the other Year Zero games. I'm thinking specifically Alien here, which gives you stress points and has a wonderful subsystem attached to that. But let's just hop over to it because it'd be worth mentioning now because it covers a few other things too. When you push a roll, you have to basically choose what's called a condition, and these are they're narrative traits, but they have a mechanical function too. There are physical ones linked to the attributes of physique and precision, and mental ones linked to logic and empathy. Physical ones are exhausted, battered, and wounded. Mental is angry, frightened, and hopeless. And when you're suffering a condition, you get 1 fewer die for any rolls linked to either physical or mental attributes, whichever one you chose. That is not as punishing as... Actually, I don't know. Is it not as punishing as Alien? I am not a math person, necessarily, so I haven't really thought through what it does mechanically at the table. 1 fewer die is 1 fewer die. Dice. 1 fewer dice? 1 fewer dice. No, 1 die. I don't know. But they stack. So the more you get, the harder it gets. Maybe it's worse because stress you can avoid, panic rolls you can avoid in Alien by chance. Here, they just pile on as your character gets more and more damaged physically and psychologically. One really nice thing is that there is a table showing your chance of success based on the number of dice you roll, and then if you push the roll or not, which is handy. Like I said, I'm not a math person, so it doesn't hurt to have something like that handy so I can sort of do a quick, is it worth it, is it not? Okay, so like I said, characters have skills, characters have attributes, they also have talents, which none of these things are new to Year Zero. Each archetype has a couple they can choose from. At the start they choose 1, and these are things like for the doctor, when you use medicine to treat other PCs, they can heal 4 conditions instead of 3. Or emergency medicine, that was chief physician. You can ignore mental conditions when using medicine. Right? So these are ways that the rules bend for you based on these things. All right. I want to jump back to something here. Blades in the Dark is probably the best known example of this, but the idea of not getting screwed over by not spending 3 hours in game preparing for a mission which will never use your preparation. Obviously, Blades in the Dark and Forged in the Dark games kind of have that as a given, but VAESEN adds in advantage. You get a mystery, and the advantage is a new acquaintance who will be available at the location to help you, an experience that gives you power, training or maintenance montage and such. And what it does is it gives you once per gaming session a plus two dice to a skill test. You have to decide before using it, but it's there. And then it's lost until the next mystery, at which point you have to choose a different skill for that. Now, when I ran it, I I was running with completely new players. In fact, some had never even played an RPG before. And I took advantage and said, all right, I don't want you to sit here and get bogged down by trying to think of what could possibly be an advantage. And so I used it more like the Forged way. So when it came to it, they were like, well, before we left, I ... I mean, I think either works. I don't think that breaks it. And it does kind of smooth things along. Character creation, like I said, is pretty easy. Once you pick your archetype, it guides you through quite a lot of it. The main thing to think about is resources. While you have this castle, you might want stuff, and resources is an important thing. If you all have 1 resources or 2 or 0, you might be hurting for things. But the archetypes cover a variety of things: occultists, doctors, academics, hunters, officers. No flat-out soldier, just officers. Priests, private detectives, servants, vagabonds, writers. It covers quite a bit there. So you won't be... I don't think you'll be lacking for ideas. And if you are, just roll that life path thing. I mean, I love life path generation, and it's right there for you to use. Okay, let's look at some other stuff here. Okay, so instead of combat, it covers conflict, which is nice because it's about all sorts of conflict. Combat is part of it, but it's not exclusively what gets covered. Now, this does, like Year Zero games, use zones and distances. It does initiative in terms of cards, like I think almost all of them. And it does tell you that if you go fighting VAESEN, it's going to go badly for you. It just is. Like, you want to find some ritual, some sort of secret to defeating or containing the VAESEN. Don't square off. Combat, when we ran it, is, it's still tense. It's something that you want to avoid, because when you take damage, you take conditions. And if you're pushing, you take conditions. You know what? I am gonna go back. I'm gonna say that this is more punishing than Alien, and that if you played Alien or watched my review on it or watched any of the AP on it, should know that is a punishing system when it comes to stress and so on and so forth. But like I said, you can always dodge it on a die roll. Just never roll ones on your stress dice. Here, though, practically everything is giving you conditions, and eventually you will run out of them and become broken, which incapacitates you and gives you critical injuries and all that stuff, which is going to stick with you throughout the game. Speaking of stress, let's talk about fear. Now, it is a horror game, so no surprise, there are fear checks and fear tests and fear rules. And when that happens, here's what I do think is maybe a little more forgiving. Alien, you roll on the panic table, and then something happens. You got to live with what it is. Here, if you become terrified, you are under that influence for a number of rounds equal to a d6. And then you get to choose, though, if you flee, faint, or attack. And once you regain control, you are no longer terrified. Though you still do get mental conditions based off this. I don't know. They're all punishing to the PCs, which is why we play them, because that's the fun part of these games. So keep that part in mind when you're going through it. Equipment and all that, I mentioned resources before. These are not, you're not nickel and diming anybody here. You have a resources score, and that tells you what you can get and have access to, and then you've got to roll for its availability, things like that. Weapons, again, don't do too much damage, like in Alien and other ones like that, because you don't tend to have a lot of health, per se. All right. Let's look at some other stuff here. So we've got a nice little sort of gazetteer on Uppsala. If you've never been or don't know anything about it, this tells you, something about it. And there's a nice little map of the Mythic North. But I say little, it's not easy to read. You might want a magnifying glass or a PDF to blow up and expand. But it gives you the context of Europe at the time. This is just post-Napoleonic Wars, where, the American Civil War is beginning. So it's roughly that area, and nationalism is becoming a thing. And part of the background is now VAESEN are starting to return. Why? What's the link? Perhaps that's something that gets expanded in a campaign. Perhaps that's just up to you. Your choice. Now in Uppsala, you have the Society's headquarters, the castle. And there are some Free League games, Year Zero games that do this, where you get to have a base of operations, whether it's a spaceship or whether it's the Society's headquarters here. And over time, after each mystery, you will get sort of experience points that you can, development points are called, that you can put into building things up, facilities, other upgrades, contacts, personnel attached to the castle, which is cool. One, this means that you've got this thing to invest in and develop, but two, it also means that your group is going to define the nature of the society. I mean, it's given we've already that should be expected, but by building the castle, defining your exact role and getting mechanical benefits for it. Do you want to have an armory to get more weapons and stuff? Do you want a carp pond to meditate upon? Do you want a difference engine, which helps you build other facilities, but it is still the mechanical computing machine? Do you want a dungeon? And in that dungeon, do you want self-flagellation tools, which do have a positive mechanical benefit? So every group is going to build this up differently. There are probably optimal choices to make, but F optimism, right? Optimizing. Okay, so I'm going to get to one thing last. I don't want to get to it before the others. I want to talk about it after. You've got plenty of information on NPCs, on how to create VAESEN. And around the world, they do include some examples for the Americas, Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and so on. Not expansive, of course, but there we are. Two things that I'm going to talk about after. Three things. Okay, well, let's talk about. I want to talk about the sample adventure first. The sample mystery. The sample mystery, The Dance of Dreams, is a very good introductory mystery, and they say it takes about 2 to 3 sessions, and it did take about 2 to 3 sessions, I would say, with new players. It involves investigating a mystery at the Witch Cat Inn. Now, I did see this before I got hold of VAESEN and looked into it, and do think it's worth noting because it hasn't really changed in the printing I have. Oh no, I say that, and of course I looked down and it has changed. Content warning: violence, death, self-harm, suicide, child harm, mind control in this scenario. That's a great addition, by the way, Free League. I didn't look at the top left corner of it for some reason. Possibly because I was also using PDFs at times. Okay, that content warning didn't used to be there. Kudos for updating the book. It's not huge, but it is in there, and you can see. So it is a dark scenario. It's a great one, but it's effing dark, okay? And just make sure your players are good with it. Mine were. And I did say ahead of time, like, all right, this is going to be a bit at times. But that content warning encompasses it all. Otherwise, it fits together well. Don't really feel like there's any railroading, or at least noticeable railroading. Like, I don't think they felt railroaded. It is a horror game and a horror mystery, so there are things that you just can't avoid, like, feeling, oh, I have to run this way. I did, in fact, get asked, were we always going to go or find this thing, or is it just chance? And it was just chance that they, at that point. got hold of something. So it really does hold up really quite well, and is a good introductory mystery. Okay, there is a whole chapter on creating mysteries. So you have to decide what VAESEN is about. You're going to name the VAESEN. They have some examples. They talk about balance, but, let's be honest, in this sort of thing, balance is not necessary. For balance, that's the sort of thing where you might ever have a chance to, say, fight it. And by and large, you're not meant to have a chance to fight VAESEN. You have to, like I said, you've got to find that thing to shut them off. So then, none of these also should really be not Monster of the Week. Monster of the Week, mysteries are perfectly fine, but they shouldn't be kind of tossed out there, right? They give you a lot to think about in terms of what the conflict is, what the misdeed that has resulted in innocent people being hurt is, where it is, and how this all fits together. How to fit clues into it, which is a great thing to have because unless you're playing Gumshoe Delta Green does have a way around that too. Not every system has a way to make sure the players, the PCs, get the clues that the players can then interpret. And I found that actually worked out quite well. We didn't really have any problems with things. They didn't necessarily know everything, but none of it held them back. A fun inclusion. Before that, there's a step-by-step structure and template that one can use. In all honesty, I think that's great to have. Obviously, it sort of goes without saying that you should have a chapter like this in a game like this. But the level of detail and the hand-holding as you go through it, I think is really necessary. Mysteries are not easy things to run, and they're not easy things to play. There's that, I don't know, not adage, but the joke about what's the secret to this mystery. It's whatever the players guessed in the first session, and then you just rework things to fit that. That's one way of doing it, and the path of least frustration for everybody and most affirmation. But if you want to have a mystery that people can really sink their teeth into, it is good to have some sort of template like this and a structure to set up. And because VAESEN, being folk tale related, there are, some of them are moral conflicts and misdeeds. There's always a link to something human, and not just a rawr monster. Okay, but one of the fun things I was going to get to there is the countdown to catastrophe. And these are placed for the primary and secondary conflicts in the mystery, and they help advance the story and push things to get a little more desperate. This is maybe the closest to railroading you might get. And I don't know why I'm kind of harping on that idea there, but the idea is that sort of at the end of each act or whatnot, at a certain point, when the GM deems it necessary, they have something foreboding and terrifying happen. This could be a storm rises. This could be graves fall over and the dead rise. And if that's not the end of it, then who knows? And then finally, the catastrophe. So there are the countdown of 3 steps, and then the catastrophe. I didn't tell the players about it. I did run through the steps, and we got to the 3rd one. I never found they were in any danger of getting to the catastrophe, but it's a good way to kind of push the action when things get to a lull, right? This is the Raymond Chandler, there's a quiet moment, 2 guys burst in the door, guns blazing, kind of thing. Pushes the action. So, I do want to give high kudos to the writers of this section, because there's a lot of almost cookie cutter game master advice out there, and even for a kind of specialized game. And so this is really good to have. It's not cookie cutter, it is a specialized game, and one should benefit from going through this. So, the last thing I want to talk about were the VAESEN themselves. So Christian symbols have an effect on them. I think with VAESEN, think kind of fairy plus, right? Because they do have things like trolls, woodwives, familiars, shapeshifters, so werewolves, spirits of the dead, ghosts, etc. But even monsters like the kraken, lintworms. They are linked to nature, which sort of helps build that conflict with humanity, especially in this era as it is industrializing and pushing its way into the wild spaces. And they all have access to magic and enchantments and curses, things like that. There are a good number of sample ones, and in them they give you the characteristics, their powers, conditions related to them, how they act in combat, how to get rid of them, that's the ritual, and then examples of conflict that can pop up as well. So there are, I believe, basically 3 for every one of them, giving you lots of plot seeds to work with. Okay, that's VAESEN. I do want to say that was a copy provided for the purposes of review, and the opinions are all mine. Anything I say in any of these videos are all my own opinions. So, please don't go thinking that Free League is channeling themselves through me. These are my takes on things based on my experiences playing and reading them. If you would like to support the channel, then please pick it up through one of the affiliate links below. They give me a small cut of whatever you paid and cost you nothing. So, until next time, this is Simon with the Tabletop Almanac. We were talking about VAESEN by Free League Publishing. Be well to each other, and don't go wandering in the dark, dark woods.